Welcome back, viewers, to another episode of our Across the Pond podcast with me and Martin. My name is Lindsey Stroud, and I'm a senior fellow with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. And with Martin Cullup, who is our international fellow at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. And we are back revisiting all of our awesome good cop experts. And we've got a fantastic gentleman. It's Kurt Yeo, spelled it Y-E-O. And I always call it Yeo instead of Yo. But he's co-founder of VSML, Vaping Saved My Life, out of South Africa. And it's a consumer advocacy organization that was formed in 2017. And he's also an advisory board member of the World Vapers Alliance. And he was one of our good cop experts and came down to Panama to visit us. So thanks for coming to Panama, and also thanks for coming on our podcast.
Hi, Lindsey. Hi, Martin. Thank you very much for the invitation. And both those excellent things. The good cop was phenomenal, and to have a quick chat with you guys this afternoon. Thank you.
Yes.
Now, Martin. It was great having you in Panama, and I think you had one of the longest journeys, didn't you? About, was it 38 hours or something? But you said when you were there that you were really pleased to come and you were meeting some people that you'd wanted to meet for quite a long time.
Yeah, so I mean, based in South Africa, which is, geographically the arse end of the world, and we can kind of watch as a spectator what's happening there. I've used over the many years since 2017 a lot of the work that people, the heroes, my heroes in THR, that I've got to meet for the very first time at Good Cop, and actually spend the time really having good in-depth discussions and picking their brains as to some of the things that I'd like to query and so forth. Good Cop was not only just about talking about the situation, but for me, it was a big learning thing as well. So I really appreciated the invitation and the opportunity to mingle with the greats of THR.
So we spoke just before we came on air about taxes, because it's a live subject in the UK, but it's been something you've had to focus on for a lot longer than us up here in Northern Europe, isn't it? You've had all sorts of problems with your government on that score.
Well, we've had lots of problems with THR in general, but tax was the latest thing that came to our shores. The initial tax was implemented in June last year, which was R2.90 per mil, and now it subsequently has been increased to R3.04 per mil. On an exchange rate value, it's actually minuscule when you compare it to the dollar or to the pound. But from a South African perspective, what it's done to our freebase, lower nicotine, locally produced e-liquids is devastating, because it effectively, for the most popular volume and nicotine strength, has pretty much more than doubled the retail price of that particular product, which has had some very, very predictable and devastating impact on the vaping market in South Africa.
Can you talk about the vaping market in South Africa for some of our viewers who might not be or even just the whole tobacco in general, like tobacco and vaping, cigarettes versus e-cigarettes, who's using them and what's access like, just kind of a bird's eye view for people who might not be aware of it.
So, I mean, South Africa is probably the most unequal society in the world currently. We have a very high unemployment rate. We have a lot of real social economic strife occurring in the country. But one of the things that we've noticed, or at least what the statistics are showing, is South Africa has not seen a decrease in smoking. It's in fact seen an increase in the smoking, and that's largely driven by an illicit trade. In fact, what we do know now, depending on which figures you prefer to use, whether it be from the University of Cape Town or whether it be through an Ipsos study, anywhere between 54 to 70% of the cigarette market is illicit. And what we're noticing is that a lot of the poorer individuals are obviously smoking, and they are using these illicit products. So it creates a very problematic area to have THR grab hold, purely from a price point of view, because pretty much all the devices, or in fact every device that comes into the country, has to be imported. There's no local manufacturing of devices. We used to have a very strong, thriving local market or local manufacturers for e-liquids, but due to that tax, that's now pretty much falling on the wayside, being replaced by disposables. But based on the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, which was conducted in 2021, around about 25% of the South African population over the age of 15 smoke cigarettes, and at the same time, only 2.2% of the population use e-cigarettes. And obviously, e-cigarettes, like we've seen in the rest of the world, is more popular among the younger groups. And in fact, the youngest group, 15 to 24, we've seen around about 3.1% of those individuals using e-cigarettes, versus 23.9% of that same cohort smoking cigarettes. And this jump is quite alarming. In the last decade, we've seen a jump from 12% right up to 25% in the smoking rate. So we've seen a reverse effect happening here. And a lot of that's to do with policies, as well as just frankly not giving a damn, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it often baffles me why we seem to be seeing in countries all over the world, kind of anti-smoking organizations recommending policies which effectively protect cigarettes. And it seems to be the same happening there. But of course, you know, your government banned cigarette sales, didn't they, during COVID? How did that work out?
Well, for certain individuals, particularly in the black market, was an absolute fabulous time. I mean, mansions were built and, you know, yachts were bought. So we saw pretty much overnight, literally within a couple of days, anybody that was a nicotine user was effectively an outlaw. There was no law about banning the use. The law was about the sale of it. So overnight, we saw many people just going to the black market and buying whatever the product they wanted. And because of that, we started seeing illicit products being almost 3 times more expensive than the tax product for at least 5 months. And you know, the likes of the multinationals really took it hard. Obviously, at one stage they opened it up for export, but for local sales, it was absolutely devastating for them. But at the same time, a lot of the illicit cigarette manufacturers were booming, absolutely booming, and that hasn't changed since. You know, I've seen these polls and I've seen these studies. And I don't believe them, because every single person that I've interacted since then and asked them, and it's a habit of mine asking what are they smoking. It's almost always an illicit product. So I would have it a guess, we're looking at around about 85 to 90% of the market is illicit. But that's not the official number. That's my take based on my observations and, you know, doing the normal work that we do.
So you were right at home in Panama then. I mean, and for people who didn't know, when we came in from like driving from the airport to our hotel, you saw billboards about like 80 to, I think I saw 90% of the tobacco market in Panama was illicit. And for people who don't know, e-cigarettes are banned in Panama, and cigarettes are like pretty much hidden at like retail stores. I didn't even know that they sold cigarettes, but you can go buy them on the street. I mean, we saw somebody selling cigarettes and suckers, you know, or like lollipops. I was just like, wow, who's marketing the kids here? Especially when you have zero government regulation over it, which is a lot of these policies just seem to, they all breed in just illicit products. It's like, you know, these knee-jerk reactions to, oh, youth vaping, we got to ban it, disregarding the adults using these products.
I know I was offered many times in that courtyard or in that square. Many times I was offered cigars, and strangely enough, I was even offered cigars by a kid that walked up to me with a box, opened them up and said, "Would you like to?" You know, obviously in Spanish, would I like to buy a cigar? And I don't know if it was the shock on my face that made him turn around, but I was absolutely blown away. This is frightening.
Yeah,
Should
it's
have
funny
took him up
that
to the conference center.
yeah, it's funny that we talk about marketing, products to kids, but in Panama we actually saw kids marketing the products to adults, didn't we? It's quite amazing.
Cheap labor.
Yeah.
Now, Kurt, what would you say here and say about Bloomberg's influence in South Africa? We know in the UK they're getting pretty involved. We know in the United States this is breeding ground for misinformation and child exploitation essentially. How heavy is his influence in South Africa that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's incredibly heavy, and it's really quite blatant. In fact, I had a bit of a chuckle this morning because we were supposed to have our last 2 public hearings for the tobacco bill this month. And, I've always stated since the beginning of this process that there's been no notification whatsoever of when these are happening. And then the day before they actually happened, and they announce it that it's going to be happening in this location, which is clearly against our constitution as well as our parliamentary framework. But the sessions that were supposed to happen last weekend, which is we're now on the 12th of March. So the 10th of March was supposed to be one of the hearings in KwaZulu-Natal province. No cancellation. Everybody expected to be, that it's going to happen, but it just didn't. And now the Bloomy cheerleaders in South Africa are up in arms because they're not going to have this bill tabled, or at least concluded by the time we have our elections. And they're up in arms saying that it's been long overdue and this is disappointing and the industry's killing the kids and so forth and so on. But Bloomberg has been incredibly active in South Africa. In fact, we have an organization called the Protect Our Next, which is effectively the PAVE of South Africa, Parents Against Vaping and e-cigarettes. They call it Protect the Next, and their partners quite blatantly are Tobacco-Free Kids, a number of other organizations, Cancer, which is our cancer organization, Heart and Lung Foundation, and even more surprisingly is our South African Medical Research Council, which is effectively a combination of our CDC and FDA in South Africa. That's the group that's responsible to providing the most important information to our health department to make these policies. They've been blatantly partnered with Bloomberg because the Global Adult Tobacco Survey of South Africa conducted in 2021, that was funded by Bloomberg, and the most recent report they did on e-cigarettes in the university setting was funded by Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. So I believe there is a conflict of interest there, and they're not providing the truth around the situation in South Africa. And I believe the focus is all wrong. If you got a country that is smoking more, smoking illicit cigarettes, and younger kids are smoking it, and they are now branching out into other illicit drugs and so forth and so on. If you really want to protect our necks, I think you should start there. And unfortunately, almost all of the focus is moved to safer nicotine products like vaping.
Yeah, we saw that in COP10, didn't we? That all the talk was about what they were going to do to vaping and other reduced risk products, and I think that goes the same for the whole of Africa, not just South Africa. I mean, Lindsey did some research on Bloomberg's funding, and it was significant that the only place where he didn't seem to be appearing was in countries which had nationalized tobacco industries. So they're spending all this time on vaping products in countries which have got high smoking rates. It's almost like they've forgotten about smoking.
Absolutely. And I'm not one of those guys that's leave us alone. Since we started this, I believe regulations are critical, particularly in a market of South Africa, because we live in a very lawless society, and as much as we complain about these things, I still believe that appropriate regulations that can be enforced is the right way to do it, to not only protect the people that are not wanting to use these products, but also protect the people that actually do use these products, because currently we have no regulations and you have no standards on these products. The only thing we can do is tax them. And that's not really effective either because of the black market. So, and all these issues is stemming from the fact of poor policy aimed at crippling and dismantling the groups and companies that are wanting to do the right thing, and handing it over, gift wrapping it to the black market. Because we are unable to enforce the laws that we want to implement. If we were in a situation like a lot of the countries in Europe and in the West, where the majority of the empower processes or measures have been in place, that's a very different story. But we don't have any of those things in place, really. You know, yes, we banned advertising in 2008 and we've implemented tax, but we don't have any support or services to assist the people that smoke in this country. We don't make any of our nicotine replacement therapies available to the majority of the individuals that need them, because they are the people that rely on public health, and that's not available to them. So a lot of the issues that we are seeing is a wish list, literally carbon copied or placed into a bill, and wanting to force or push that through with no way of being able to implement it or even enforce it.
And you've mobilized consumers over there, but I've seen videos you posted on social media and things you've said about it. It seems the government is trying to make sure that consumers can't take part in the democratic process, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've written twice in a daily newspaper highlighting that there's a very clear intent to not have individuals participate in it. And I've seen it firsthand on at least 3 occasions at the 3 different hearings that I've been, is that they bus people in, provide them with a script, and then they get handpicked as to who speaks at those hearings. And every now and again, they will allow somebody, the likes of myself, to have a chat. I've only ever been able to share once. And once again, you know, according to the South African Constitution, there is a certain process that has to be followed in terms of how it gets communicated, what gets communicated, what can be expected at these hearings, and the process follows. But what we've seen is not really in the spirit of the Constitution. And in fact, it's dead set against the Constitution, because literally 3 days before, or a day before, the Portfolio Committee of Health received the bill from the Department of Health, there was a Constitutional Court ruling that overturned a bill purely because the public participation process was severely flawed. And every one of those items that was raised by the Constitutional Court has been witnessed and seen in this particular bill's process. So it is really, 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 and I cannot express this any stronger, really disappointing that they've taken this route, because all that it does is wasted a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's prevented from getting to appropriate regulations. Because purely based on that, it's almost a given that this bill, as soon as it gets signed into law by either this president or a coming president in the next year or 2, is going to be litigated. It's going to be in courts. And that's another 2-3 years of fighting, more money wasted, money that could be used more appropriately in the fight of tobacco, like providing nicotine replacement therapies, like doing proper studies, so forth and so on, is purely wasted on because they were hard set on trying to steamroll this bill through the system. And it's very disappointing because a lot of people are going to be hurt by this.
Seems the way that it goes in the States, everything that they do to try to attack tobacco. I mean, this menthol ban that they want to do at the federal level, it's just gonna, you're right, it's gonna end up in court cases where you could just have properly invested money into cessation therapies, you know, the FDA proven ones, or, you know, doing research into the efficacy of e-cigarettes, unbiased research on that. Well, we're kind of getting towards the end of our section or of our episode, but what advice do you have, I guess, for both consumers going into, especially next year? We're going to have COP11s right around the corner. And also, I guess, to your delegates, if you could send a message to them, you know, prior to the next COP.
No, my delegates won't listen to me. So, I just, you know, when it comes to the consumers, I think, as always, get involved. Understand the science, understand the evidence, but more importantly, just do what you're doing. Use the products, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, the ripple effect comes into play here. Is if a person who smokes sees somebody that has successfully switched or cut smoking, or quit altogether, then that's tells a story, a testimonial, if you will, to encourage somebody else to do it. Because I'm a firm believer, at the end of the day, the original mission is still the most important mission, and that is to escape the harms of smoking. Combustible tobacco, that's the mission. It's always been the mission. This mission creep into tobacco companies, into nicotine now, is just, in my eyes, there's something very sinister happening there. But I would say to the consumers out there, get involved when there's a call to sign a petition or upload a testimonial or take a survey. Do it. It's a couple of minutes of your life to do it. But more importantly, continue buying correct products that keep you off cigarettes, and share your story with people around you who are smoking, to tell them, and that way it's going to create this massive wave, which we already see in the world. It's an enormous wave of people choosing a product that assists them as an individual. I think one of the greatest quotes I saw recently is that how can your concerns about addiction trump my concerns about cancer? You know, it's incredibly important topic, is that I have a right to my own health, body autonomy. If I choose to go have a cigarette, then I can, but I need to understand those consequences. But if I choose to use a safer nicotine product, I also need to know those consequences. But now what we're seeing is trying to remove that information and remove those rights from individuals, and then using children as human shields as a justification for it. And in South Africa's context, you're using children as a human shield, but they effectively are facing far greater strife than a cigarette. The statistics around youth health and youth wellness in South Africa is frightening. A cigarette is way down on the list, believe it or not. But the focus is obviously around nicotine, addiction, so forth and so on. And I think it's just show business effectively. There's no truth behind it. And as I said, I think this move towards nicotine, the prohibition around nicotine, or the attack against nicotine, I think there's a more sinister situation happening here. And I think it's a lot to do with pharmaceuticals as well as protecting the tax base of certain countries.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd echo that with it doesn't matter how much misinformation there's been around for the last few years. Everywhere in the world, the number of vapors keeps going up. So I think that people are getting the message that these things are less harmful, and that by extension, their friends and family get the message as well. So,
well, just think. Sorry, Martin. Just interesting. because I like to talk to people. I think it's about people. It's always been about people. Two of my former customers, when I used to own a vape shop years ago, I've kept in contact with them, a young couple, and they just had a baby this afternoon, and they invited me to come to the hospital to come see the new baby, so forth and so on. And both of them were former smokers and switched to vaping when they came to my shop. And now both of them are vape free as well. And those stories just make my day. People taking hold of their life, making better choices, and then bringing in a new generation. And ironically, it's very similar to my story. The grandfathers aren't there. They passed away because of smoking.
Yeah. Nice story to end with. Have you got anything else, Lindsey, or should we wrap up?
We can wrap up. I'll let you close this off.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Kurt, for joining us. It was great seeing you in Panama, and it's fantastic talking to you again here. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. We'll get back soon with another edition of the Across the Pond podcast very soon. We've got a couple more lined up to interview. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.